will fall, the mountains will move, every chain of the past you've broken into. Over fear, over lies, we're singing the truth, and nothing is impossible with you. There is hope within the fight, in the wars that rage inside. Though the shadows steal the light, your love is my battle cry, the anthem for all my life. Every giant will fall, the mountains will move, every chain of the past you've broken into. Over fear, over lies, we're singing the truth, and nothing is impossible. Every giant will fall, the mountains will move, every chain of the past you've broken into. Over fear, over lies, we're singing the truth, and nothing is impossible with you. No greater name, no higher name, no stronger name than Jesus. You overcame, broke every chain, forever reign, King Jesus. No greater name, no higher name, no stronger name than Jesus. You overcame, broke every chain, forever reign, King Jesus. Every giant will fall, the mountains will move, every chain of the past you've broken into. Over fear, over lies, we're singing the truth, nothing is impossible. Every giant will fall, the mountains will move, every chain of the past you've broken into. Over fear, over lies, we're singing the truth, nothing is impossible with you. Oh, nothing is impossible.
Man, that's good. Hey, go ahead and be seated this morning, and welcome to Morning Star Baptist Church. We're so glad that you're here today. And everywhere where you're seated, there should be a packet of information. Go ahead and get that out right now. Take a look at that. That has some information about some things that are going on, but it also has this connection card in there. I'm going to invite you right now to fill this out, and then you can drop it in the basket on the way out the door. If this is your first time here, let me say again, thank you for being here. And we'd love to send you a gift card as our way of saying thank you for being here. So we just ask you to fill out as much information as you feel comfortable putting on here. We'd love to get them given to you. If you'd rather do it electronically, you can do it on your phone. You can text the word connect to the number on the screen, and you can just fill out there. It goes right to it. We'll still get that information to you. You can also give. Text the word give to the number. Or, man, God's working in your heart about something. I just really need somebody to pray about this, or I need to get baptized, or I want to accept Jesus. Whatever that might be, you can text the word response, and you can fill that out as well. However you want to do it. Whether you want to do it in the card or do it that, we just want to connect with you somehow. And so that's our way of just inviting you to come and be part of that. There's a lot going on. First of all, we have our Discovering Morning Star class, which is right after the service today. We've had some people sign up for it, so we're going to have some people in there. But if you're like, this is enough, and I think I might want to go find out more about the church, it's right afterwards. Free lunch. You can hang out. We're going to meet in the conference room, which is right out this door and across the hall, right after the service. And it'll be about an hour. It won't be too long at all. We'd love to have you join us if you want to find out more about Morning Star. The other thing is there's an insert in your packet there. This Saturday is Miss Emma Howard's 95th birthday. And we want to celebrate that. Yeah, it's awesome. She's a founding member of this church. She was there from the beginning, and we want to celebrate her. And how we're going to do this, I'm just going to invite you Saturday morning. I know it's Halloween, but it's in the morning. We're going to have you meet here at the church. The information's on there. And we're going to drive and do a parade by her house, in front of her house. You can really went down, yell at her in a good way. Like, tell her happy birthday, scream at her, hey, I think that would just make her day, and what a great way to honor her. Let her know she's not forgotten. We definitely love her, and we miss her. We want to celebrate her on her special day. So this Saturday, if you have nothing else going on, information's there in the packet. Me here at the church, we'll caravan over there, just drive over to her house, and wave to her. So we want you to be a part of that. Another thing is you'll see more information about this, but for ladies, there's a ladies bonfire coming up on November 12th. It's on a Thursday. Mark your calendars, put it in your phone right now, November 12th, Thursday. And follow our Facebook page. If you haven't followed our Facebook page, a lot of our information gets put there as well. But we want you to be a part of that for all of our ladies that are here. A lot of fun for you. We look at more information about that. Baskets up front. We announced this last Sunday. We've got 20 baskets up here, and we're asking everyone at the end of the service today, we'll do this during our response time, we'll invite you to come up and grab a basket. And what's in there is a little card that has everything that's going there to make a Thanksgiving meal for someone in our community right now that's struggling. And a way for us to love them and show love of Christ to them. And we're asking you to deliver that the day that we have our Thanksgiving dinner here. That's November 15th, right? It's a Sunday, November 15th. So on that day, you'll have everything in there. We'll provide the turkeys. So the turkeys will be provided for you. We've had some very generous people donate the money to be able to buy the turkeys. So we're all set with the turkeys. They're going to be taken care of. So the turkey's bought. We just need you to buy like a thing of stuffing, some box side dishes, a dessert, rolls, that kind of stuff. Put in there and then deliver that to them. Address it on the card on November 15th. So at the end of the service, so make your way up here. You'll know when. I'll say, hey, let's come up here. Let's grab a basket. If you don't get one, all right, don't sweat it. You're still going to pray for somebody in your community, or I'm sure there's more names we can come up with and get them to you. So just don't be slow. All right, at the end of just come up here and grab a basket. All right, and then we'll make sure that we are able to and just be the hands and feet of Jesus. The other thing is today is Ryan's last Sunday with us. Ryan came to be our youth pastor this year, and I'm going to tell you what, Ryan has done an amazing job getting on board. And God has used Ryan in a huge way to impact the young people in our church in a way that wouldn't have been able to happen without God using and speaking through him. And the young people that know Jesus and the mission to be built, and the fact that he's not just leaving, he's left a team here to keep moving that forward. And so we're excited for Ryan. Look, here's the deal. Some like, oh man, Ryan's leaving. The thing is, we're not a keeping church, we're a sending church. And Ryan came and he's learned some things, and God's going to use him in a crazy, awesome way. And so I'm going to encourage you today at the end of the service today, man, whenever you grab your baskets and invite people down front for that, go find Ryan and give him a hug and love on him and tell him you're praying for him, you're excited for him as he takes his next step. Just love God just increase him around him, man. And he's going to be used in awesome ways. So Ryan, we love you. We're so thankful for the time we have with you. Everything you've done for us. God's going to be out there. We're mad at you, but we love you, right? So, but man, come say hi to Ryan and say bye to him and tell him you love him. Definitely. Right, let's pray. We're going to keep worshiping this morning. God, we thank you for who you are. We're just so thankful for this opportunity today. Like Ben talked about, like to be excited about our eternal life, the fact that we have hope and forgiveness and a new life in you, and we can celebrate that today. We can encourage one another by celebrating. And we come together for corporate worship, not just to check our feelings off God, but that we can obviously worship you and be obedient here today. By worshiping together, lifting our voices. God, we pray to bless the rest of our time. It's just that. That you're glorified through all of it. It's all about you. That God, that as we lift up our voices and sing to you, as we give to you, whether we text it in, we drop it off the basket, how that everything is an act of worship. And then God, we pray for the preaching of your word here in this room, that God will impact the hearts of people that are here, just like it's impacted me. God, I pray that you will just change all of us. Every Sunday, we're asking for change. We're asking for the change that only you can bring into our lives. We're asking for the restoration, the new life that only you can bring. So God, soften the hearts this morning. God, remove the distractions this morning, amen. So your word can penetrate our lives, impact the people around us with the gospel.
Church, there's coming a day when we'll stand before our King and we'll lift our voices in praise for his goodness and his greatness. But I love that we don't have to wait. Right here, right now we can praise him. Right here we can lift our voices, church. Let me hear you sing. Oh. Someone could call on your name and be saved. It's the only name. So this morning, Lord, we ask that as John comes and he brings your word, Lord, we ask that you would move in a special way for those of us that are here that know you. Lord, remind us of all you have for us. Lord, for those that don't know you, Lord, we ask that you would, Lord, just grab a hold of hearts that they would trust you this morning because you're good, because you're worthy, and because the plans that you have for us are so far beyond anything this world has to offer.
This morning, if you got your Bibles, go to Genesis chapter 37. We're going to be this morning, Genesis chapter 37. Growing up in Texas, there's only a couple of things that are required of you to grow up in Texas, but one of them is, especially for a young man, is it's almost like this unwritten rule. You have to be involved in football in some way. Like, football's king, and I know it is here too. There's definitely, Ben has told me, like there's definitely some pockets here in Ohio that's like the same thing. But my town growing up, Fort Neches, Texas, would literally, and that's not cliche, it's not a figure of speech, but literally shut down on Friday nights. Everything was closed. I think every police officer we had in the city was there. All the firemen. If anything went on in the city, like, there was nobody there to fix it or handle it because everybody's at the football game, and they start you young. Like, you play, we call it Pop Warner back there. I think we call it Mighty Mites or whatever. But you start young, you work your way up. But like, it's just like this expected thing. You have to play football, or at least try play football at some point in your middle school and your high school years. And so, growing up there, I didn't want to be any different. And I love football. I grew up around it. I love watching it. I loved everything to do with it. In fact, one time when I think I was 4, I ran away from home on my tricycle because my parents didn't let me go to the Friday night football game. So they literally shut down the football game, announced on the VA, like, hey, we're looking for this little boy. And I actually went down, I didn't make it very far, but I was mad because football was life, even for me. But I get to seventh grade. In seventh grade, we had a competitive flag football league that we would actually play other schools, other seventh graders in flag football. And like every other boy who was in middle school, everybody made the team. But you had to try out still, trying to figure out like where you're going to play, all that kind of stuff. And so there I was, tryout day for seventh grade flag football. And you got to understand, I have not always been the athletic specimen you see before you today. The fact that you're laughing hurts my feelings a little bit. But anyway, I was about that big around. I had no meat on me whatsoever. I was fast. That's all I had. I was fast. That's all I had going for me. But here I am at tryouts, and I was picked on. Like middle school was rough for me. All right. We can laugh about that. Middle school was rough. I got picked on a lot. I got teased a lot, and so we show up. I was the guy who was always picked last for everything in PE, the dodgeball, kickball. I was always the last pick. So tryout day, no different. I'm expecting it. I'm expecting to be picked last. And sure enough, there I am standing there. My flag's out. So excited to be there. But then, like, I'm the last. It's almost like they had to have me on their team type thing. And so, in the collective sigh from the team of, oh, we got John. Like, that's kind of like, I was like, I don't belong here. Like, something's not adding up. And so, but it got to a point during that day, I got tired of it. Like, I reached my limit, right, being picked on. And I'm just sorry, so burp no also. But I was like, I'm done. Like, I can't handle this. I don't feel like I belong here. And so finally, the coach called a play, and it was in the huddle. He said, okay, you're going to pitch it off to Decker. It's my turn to have the ball, I guess. You pitch off to Decker, and then he's going to run around the end. And you could hear the collective sigh again in the huddle. Oh, man. Like, and they weren't holding back. Come on, he's going to drop the ball. Like, come on, they're going to get him. Oh, man, we need this. And I was done. I'm done. So I made my mind. I knew what I was going to do. And in my seventh grade mind, it was going to be awesome. So the quarterback snaps the ball, and I run to the right. He pitches to me. But instead of running that way, I turn around on purpose and ran the other way to my own end zone. And I get there, and I spike the ball, pull out my flag, and I go, safety. And it didn't turn out like I wanted it to turn out, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, in my mind, I'm getting back at them. Like, it's not how it worked. I ran lots of laps that day. I made up for it. 8th grade, I was starting tight end. It was great. High school, I'm like, football's not for me. Basketball's more my sport. But in my mind, I was like, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to show them how they treated me and how bad this is. But it just made me look cool. But I had that feeling of, I don't belong here. Like, they don't want me here. They make it evident they don't want me here. I shouldn't be here. I weigh like 40 pounds soaking wet. Like, this is not my sport. This isn't for me. But I just don't know if you've ever felt that way before. That you're like, I don't belong here. And some of you are like, yeah, I kind of feel that. Like, whatever circumstance you're in life right now, like, I don't belong here. And those of you are saying, no, I don't, you're lying, because we've all been there. Some of you might be there today, but I just don't belong here. And what I want to do is, over the next couple of weeks, I want to talk about this idea of I don't belong here. Looking through the life of Joseph. And there's some things that happened to him over the next couple of weeks that he found himself in situation after situation where we look at that, and maybe even he at some point said, I don't belong here. And today I want to talk about the idea of I don't belong here. This isn't fair. And if you're anything like me, when I grew up, my mom always told me, life's not fair. Right? And I used to go, oh, come on, you're so dumb. You don't know. I mean, life's not fair. So what kind of answer is that anyway, right? Now I'm older, I'm like, you're right, life's not fair. But that's what we're going to look at today. I don't belong here because life's not fair. I'm looking at Joseph. We need a little background. So bear with me. I'll give you some background on Joseph. Okay? So Abraham. Everybody say Abraham. I want to make sure you guys are awake. All right, so Abraham, called out by God. Abraham has two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. God comes and says, hey, I'm going to bless the line of Isaac. That's going to be the promised line of the Messiah, like a great nation through him. And Isaac has two sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau are the ones who fought back and forth, and Jacob stole his birthright, his inheritance. Well, our storyline follows Jacob, and Jacob has a bunch of sons, and one of them is Joseph. But Jacob's an interesting story. Jacob, because he fights with Esau, he has to run away to his uncle's house, where he falls in love with his daughter, right? His name, Rachel. Loves Rachel. Falls madly in love. I want to marry Rachel. Laban says, okay, work for me, and I'll let you marry her 7 years from now. Long story short, works 7 years. Laban tricks him, actually gives him his other daughter to marry, his name Leah. And Jacob's like, this isn't right, but it's too late. I'm married to this woman. So his uncle said, hey, just work 7 more years. You'll be good. You can marry Rachel. So he works 14 years just to be able to marry the love of his life. So he's got 2 wives, all right? Rachel and Leah. But he really, 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 really loves Rachel. Interesting family dynamic, different message for a different time. But he loves Rachel. Leah gives him 4 boys back to back. Bam, 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 bam. Like 4 boys. Awesome. It doesn't take long for us to figure out that Rachel is barren. She can't have kids, and it bothers her. So what she does, like typical of that culture, she took a girl who worked for her and said, hey, you guys want to get married? Great, you have to get married, and I'll just kind of, you have kids with my husband, I'll kind of vicariously raise them and be their mom. So Rachel does that. Then Leah can't have any more kids, so Leah's like, I'm not going to get behind in that game. So I'm going to give my girl who works for me, and you guys, and so kids are all over the place, right? In fact, he has 11 boys and 1 girl up to this point. And finally, Rachel gets pregnant. Everybody's all excited about that. Right? Lisa, Jacob, Rachel are all excited about that. And the boy that's born is Joseph. And Rachel names Joseph. And here's what Joseph means. It literally means, may God grant me. See kind of Rachel's heart. She just desperately wants to have children with Jacob. Super excited about it. And Joseph is just absolutely loved by Jacob. I mean, Jacob's happy, Rachel's happy. It seems like the family's all together. In the background. And all this is happening while Jacob is moving. So Jacob has a bunch of sons while he's still working for Uncle Laban. But all of this, what we're talking about now, is happening while he's traveling back from there. He meets Esau. They make their relationship right again. They reconcile brother on brother, like they make it right. And then now Jacob's in the part of trying to settle where his dad's living, where Isaac's living still. Like trying to find his place. Like, where do I want to live? This is where he has Joseph. Then Rachel gets pregnant again, and they're excited again. But this time, Rachel, when she's giving birth, she dies in childbirth. She has another little boy named Benjamin. So Rachel had 2 boys, Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph is always Jacob's favorite. My father so far, Joseph is Jacob's absolute.
Yeah, it's gonna sound weird.
He's an apple of his eye. He goes on all the time. In fact, he didn't make Joseph work the field like his brothers did. So his brothers have to go out to work. They're all grown. Some of them have their own families by the time. Joseph's a little kid. He doesn't have to work the field as much as his brothers did. They see that. And they quickly pick up on Dad's favoritism. And they become insanely jealous of Joseph. And then Dad does this thing. Right? Jacob does this crazy thing. Doesn't help a whole lot. Jacob makes this coat of many colors. You guys heard of a coat of many colors? Shake your heads, yeah. Dolly Parton made a movie about it years ago, right? All right. Anyway, so he gives Joseph this coat of many colors, but it's an overcoat that goes full length down to his wrist and full length down to his ankles. Not that overcoat you work the field in. It's fancy. It's made of precious fabric. It looks rich. It looks lavish. And Jacob and Joseph, which obviously the brothers see that and they're like, okay, this is absolutely ridiculous. Look at chapter 37, excuse me. This is where we pick the story. Here in verse 1. It says, Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan, and these are the family records of Jacob. So it's telling you this is a historical event that really happened. I'm going to tell you about it. It says, at 17 years of age, Joseph tended the sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. That's the 2 girls that worked for Rachel and Leah, okay? And his father's wives. I'm talking about Rachel and Leah. And he brought a bad report about them to their father. Let's stop there for just a second, all right? Joseph, all right, he's already Dad's favorite. Dad gave him the most expensive okay, so like you have kids, it's like, okay, you're going to go to the most expensive store to buy your favorite kid clothes, and all your other kids have to get their clothes from Walmart. Okay, it's that kind of thing, all right? Like, so Abercrombie versus Walmart, right? Or whatever richest store you can think of, right? So that's what it is. So, but then they're out in the fields. Joseph isn't really working. He's just hanging out. And he runs home to Dad, and he tattles on them. This is typical younger brother stuff, right? So some of you who has younger siblings, you're gonna relate to this a little bit, okay? Joseph runs home and says, hey, Dad, your boys, yeah, they're lazy. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So he's favorite. He has the best coat, and now he's tattling. All right, so it's not going well for Joseph. All right, verse 3. Now Israel, that's Jacob's other name, by the way. Now Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons, because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age. And he made a robe of many colors for him. And when his brothers saw that their father loved Joseph more than all of his brothers, they hated him, could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. We got to paint this picture. You got to understand it. So forgive me if I'm being a little redundant, but we have to get this. It says in verse 4, it says his brothers literally hated him. Now, if you have brothers and sisters, I'm sure at some point you guys had the argument, I hate you. No, I hate you. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. This is a like homicidal type hatred. Like, we hate this guy. Like, it would be better if he disappeared permanently. And then at the end of verse 4, look at it. It says they couldn't bring themselves to say anything nice to him at all. Let me put that simply. What it means is they were a jerk to him any chance they got. In other words, Joseph knew that his brothers didn't like him. That's what it's saying there. Like, anytime he was around, they made it so obvious. We hate you. We hate that you're here. We hate why you're here. We hate everything about you. And they treated him that way. Right? That's what the Bible's saying. That's the family dynamic we have. So there's this family dynamic of favoritism. Then add to that Joseph's the typical annoying teenager brother at this point. And then Joseph has some dreams. Check this out. It gets better. All right. So verse 5. All right. It says, then Joseph had a dream. All right. So we have favoritism. We have the fancy coat. We have he's a tattletale. All right. Then he has a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Verse 6. He said to them, listen to this dream that I had. I have to stop there because in my mind, all right, we have 3 boys. We love them. They're amazing. Okay. But in my mind, because we have boys and how they relate to one another, I can see how this went down. Like, I can picture his attitude, how he ran up to his brothers and everything. It wasn't, hey, guys, I had this dream. Maybe you guys can help me out with this. Here's how it went. Guys, you got to listen to this dream, man. It's awesome. You guys, you're horrible in it, but I'm awesome. This is how he's telling it to them. Look at it. He says in verse 5, he says, listen to this dream I had. He's so excited about this. In verse 7, there we were, binding sheaves in the field. Now, here's what ticks them off first. This boy has never done manual labor in his life. He has never binded sheaves ever. If you don't know what that is, we roll our hay up in the big bales, in the big circular bales, or we square them up and square them up. We put them in rectangle bales. They didn't do that. They would gather their wheat and their hay together and leave them in big stalks called sheaves. Okay, so he's like, hey, we were binding sheaves, and immediately like, you've never done everything in your life. Like, shut up. All right. So anyway, he's like, hey, there we were in the field, binding sheaves. He says, suddenly, my sheaf stood up. Now, it's already standing up. What he means by it got taller. It got elevated, all right? So my sheaf got elevated, stood up, and your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to my sheaf. He's excited about this dream because in this dream, his brothers are nobodies and he's something, which he was already treated like something by his dad, right? So here's how they respond. Verse 8, are you really going to reign over us? They got the meaning of the dream. His brothers asked him, are you really going to rule us? Look at the rest of that verse. So they hated him even more because of his dream and what he had said. It gets even better, right? Like verse 9. Then he had another dream and told his brother. Now here's where the annoying teenager brother comes into play. He saw how they responded the first time. All right. So if he was clueless and wasn't picking up on the hatred they were laying down before then, now he should at least know. Like how they responded the first time. So now he's rubbing it in their face. Everybody follow? Like he had another dream and the first people he go to tell is his brothers. Oh man, this is going to get him so good. Like this is awesome. I love it. I'm so good. They're so bad, right? So he can't wait. He goes, hey, I had another dream. Look at it. Here's what he says. He says, I had another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And they got the meaning. Now here's what he does. This time his father was there. Verse 10, he told his father and his brothers, but his father rebuked him. Not because of the dream, but how he presented it. He says, what kind of dream is this that you have had? He said, are your mother and your brothers and I going to bow down to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So what that means is, look, Jacob didn't get mad at Joseph for the dream necessarily. He got mad at him because of how he was presenting it, because it says that Jacob kept it and thought about it. Like Jacob's like, okay, there's something to this dream. Really cool dreams, really easy to get the interpretation. Basically, both dreams indicating that the brothers are going to be in a situation one day where they would bow down to this young, puny, annoying brother. And even Jacob got onto Joseph because he was being arrogant about it. It was about how he was presenting the dream. So it's not the dream. It's not Joseph's fault that he had dreams. It's how he handled it, right? The annoying part. So then Jacob does something that's not really smart. All of this is going on. Jacob sees how all 11 brothers are responding to Joseph. And in fact, what he does is pretty stupid. He sees this jealousy bubbling up in his sons towards Joseph. He has to see that they treat him like a jerk anytime that he's around. He saw how they responded to the dream talk, but yet what he does is he sends Joseph all by himself, wearing his coat of many colors, to go check on the same brothers that he's already tattled on, right? And he sends them out there to the middle of nowhere to do that. It's not smart. Look at verse 12. That's what happens. His brothers had gone to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. And Israel, or Jacob, said to Joseph, your brothers, you know, are pasturing the flocks at Shechem. Get ready. I'm sending you to them. And Joseph replies, I'm ready. In verse 14, then Israel said to him, go and see how your brothers and the flocks are doing, and bring word back to me. So he sent him from the valley of Hidron, and he went to Shechem. So he sends him by himself to a group of guys who hate him, who want him dead, wearing the fancy coat that he gave them with one purpose. Go look what they're doing and come back and tell me about it. This isn't going to end well. Jacob really should have known. What happened was when he gets to Shechem, he's wandering around a field. The next couple of verses, he's wandering around a field, and somebody comes and says, hey, who are you looking for? He says, my brothers, our sheep are supposed to be here. And they said, they've moved down to Dothan, which is about 12 more miles down the road. So now they're really out there in the middle of nowhere. And so Joseph goes down there to go check on him. Look in verse 18. It says, they saw him in the distance. And before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. And they said to one another, here comes that dreamer. Come on, let's kill him and throw him in one of the pits. And we can say that a vicious animal ate him. And then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. You hear the hatred in there? Now, is Joseph annoying? Yes. Is he the favorite? Yes. Do they want to do things to him because he's the little brother and he's driving them crazy? Absolutely. But what they're saying they want to do, he doesn't deserve that. Right? It doesn't fit. What happens is Reuben's the oldest son. Reuben wasn't there when they said, hey, let's kill him, but he comes up and he hears about the plan. And Reuben says, wait, he doesn't tell him out loud. He says, okay, what we'll do is I got to change their mind. I'll convince them to throw him in the pit. And then the Bible says that he's thinking about how he can rescue Joseph later. So Reuben's idea is get him in the pit, get him in the hole in the ground, and then when everything kind of cools down, he'll go and get Joseph out, tell him to run home, and don't ever come back again. That's kind of Reuben's idea. Before Reuben could work that plan to rescue his brothers sold him as a slave. Look at verse 23. It says, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off his robe, the robe of many colors that he had on, and they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it, so it's not a well. It's just a hole in the ground. Then they sat down and ate a meal. You talk about the callousness here, right? They're thinking about killing this guy or selling him into slavery, and he's in a pit, probably crying. I imagine he's not sitting there quietly, and they just sit down and eat a meal in the presence of that. That's just crazy to me. It says they looked up, and there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, and resin going down to Egypt. Verse 26, then Judah said to his brothers, what do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he's our brother. I mean, he's our own flesh. I mean, can't kill him. I mean, he's our brother. Let's just make him a slave. That's better, right? So anyway, it says his brothers agreed. So when the Midianite traders passed by, they pulled Joseph out of the pit, sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph to Egypt. So what happens is they take him out and they sell him to this group of Ishmaelites. Now, interesting story, not going to go down there, but Ishmaelites are basically their cousins, right? Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, right? Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob has, so these are the lines, these are people who were descended from Ishmael. Same great-grandfather, Abraham, right? Just different lineage through Ishmael or Isaac. So they sell him to their cousins, right? And they take him down. What happens is the brothers take a goat, they kill a goat, they get the blood, they take the coat of many colors, they rip it up a little bit, they dip it in the blood, and they send it home to dad. And then they're like right behind. Like they send it home to dad, and then they show up. Jacob looks at it, and obviously he thinks that a wild animal got his son, he killed his son, because here's the coat covered in blood. Poor Jacob, man, thinking like this is his son. Like I shouldn't have favorites. I get that, but he loves him, and now this is how. Think about Joseph. Think about what that must have been like to be treated like that by your brothers. Right? Thinking the whole time he's in the pit, like I don't belong here. Like I shouldn't be in this pit, and then being sold to slaves. But he's like, I don't belong here. Like I don't deserve to be treated by my family like this, by my friends. Like almost like we could kind of understand. Like we expect that kind of treatment from our enemies, from people who hate us, but not from family. I don't belong here. And then it goes from bad to worse. So he's in the pit, but then he gets sold to slavery. So here's this 17-year-old boy who's roughed up by his brothers, sold to the Ishmaelites, who were distant cousins, and the whole time thinking, man, I don't belong here. I don't belong in this caravan. I don't belong being bound up in chains. I don't belong being around people who I'm technically related to, but I don't know who they are, and they're taking me somewhere I don't know. You ever feel that way, like you don't belong here? Like you don't belong. Whatever situation, whatever circumstance you're in, whatever pit you're in, whatever area of life you're in right now, you ever feel like I don't belong here? Like what's happening to me is just not fair. Here's this young boy. He's tied up. He's headed to Egypt. And look in verse 36. I want you to underline this word. I want you to circle it. We're gonna come back to it, but I want you to see this. Verse 36 starts off with a very interesting word, meanwhile. I want you to underline that word. I want you to highlight it. If you got your Bible, if you don't put it in your phone, the word meanwhile. It says, meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, officer of Pharaoh, and the captain of the guard. Meanwhile. That's all we get. We have a boy sold to slavery, and what we're told is, meanwhile, here's what happens to him. What must that meanwhile must have been like for him? Like it was probably a month of traveling from Canaan down to Egypt. If they walked, maybe a little shorter if they were on a cart. But meanwhile, Joseph's got to be thinking, I don't belong here. Like I don't belong on this cart. I don't belong walking behind this horse. Like I'm not supposed to be a slave. I have a father who loves me. I have a home. I have a place to sleep. I have food. I have clothing. Like I don't belong here. I don't belong in this situation. And I don't know about you, but I have found myself in that situation. Like I don't belong here. This just isn't fair. And maybe you have too. Like I don't belong broken and debt. I have a job. I pay my bills. How did all this catch up to me? I don't belong in the unemployment line. Like I had a job that I worked hard to get. I went to school for. I got a degree. I put in the hours to succeed and get ahead. I don't belong in the hospital. I'm too young. My wife's too young. My kids are too young. And now I got to sit here in the hospital and listen to a doctor talk about cancer. I don't belong here. I don't belong in the middle of a divorce. What happened? It seems like it came out of nowhere. Like, where did it all go wrong? I don't belong here. I don't belong here standing in the cemetery saying goodbye. That person had too many years of life ahead of them. They were too young. There was so much they could still do. I don't belong here saying goodbye to them. I don't belong here. I don't belong here in a country I don't even recognize anymore. We have a constitution and we have laws, and yet it seems like none of it matters anymore. I don't belong here. You plug in whatever the situation. I don't belong here. It's not fair. What happened to Joseph was horrible. It was unfair. It was wrong. It was hurtful. It was vengeful. Like we would look at it and say it's despicable. In fact, I don't even know if there's even a word in the English language to attach to this to describe how horrible it is. It's one thing for a nation to come in and take over and send you off as a slave. It's another thing for your blood relatives, your brothers, to do that. Like how ridiculous that was. Joseph would totally be justified, we would think at least, in hating his brothers. They ruined my life. It's not my fault Dad loves me. And I didn't ask for that. I didn't ask to be born. We would probably feel he'd be justified in hating his father for sending him into a situation that he had to know was not good with his brothers who were hated him. We would even understand if Joseph decided to turn his back on God and get bitter. So much could happen in that meanwhile. We're not given a time frame. All we get is, here's Jacob finding out that, or thinking that his son's dead, and then the very next verse, meanwhile, Joseph sold as a slave in Egypt. A lot that goes on in that meanwhile, isn't there? tend to justify our behavior in the meanwhiles of our life. The valleys, the battles, the unfairness, the sickness, the debt, the unknown, the anxieties, the fears, those all become our meanwhiles. And we're not given a time frame of how long it's going to last. Joseph had no idea where he was going. He had no idea how long it was going to take him to get there. He had no idea what was waiting for him when he got there, or what the rest of his life. He doesn't have. Now we have it. We can read it. We just turn the page. Oh man, it turns out good. He didn't have that. And for you and me, whatever meanwhile you're in right now, you don't have a page you can turn to figure out how it ends, do you? And that's what stinks about it. And that's what's unfair about it. And we look at that and we can become bitter. We can think, hey, this isn't fair. We could turn off. We could turn away. And we're like, we don't know how long this is going to last. It's not where I'm supposed to be. I don't belong here. So there's three things real quick I want to unpack from it. We're going to fly through it. But the first thing is this. We got to get out of that verse 36, man, the meanwhile. Number one, meanwhiles don't last forever. Whatever meanwhile you're in right now, whatever that looks like for you, it doesn't last forever. Though it might seem to. Even if your meanwhile lasts until the Lord calls you home. James says this. He says, our lives are but a vapor anyway. They appear for a small time, and then they're gone. So even if the meanwhile that you're in, or the meanwhile that I'm in, lasts until God calls me home, it's not going to last forever. And that's why I love what Paul wrote in Romans chapter 8, verse 18. Here's what Paul says. He says, for I consider, I'm thinking about it right now, I consider that the sufferings of this present time, what Paul's talking about, my meanwhile that I'm in right now, the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed to us. I love that verse. Paul's saying, a guy who's been shipwrecked, beat, stoned, left for dead, thrown in prison. We looked at him last week a little bit. He says, listen, in the meanwhile, whatever that looks like for you, nothing compared to the glory that's going to be revealed in heaven. Nothing can compare it to eternity. Then John says this in Revelation 21. He says, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. And there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. There's coming a day. And no matter what meanwhile we're going through in this world, no matter how painful it might be right now, one day God's going to wipe away all tears. No more sorrow. Or death, or pain. I love the hymn that says this, what a day that will be. When my Jesus I shall see, when I look upon his face, the one who saved me by his grace. He takes me by the hand and leads me through the promised land. What a day, glorious day that will be. Amazing promise. The meanwhile is not going to last forever. The second thing we get from this passage is don't get bitter in the meanwhile. Don't get bitter in the meanwhile. As we look at this over the next couple of weeks, we're going to see the patience of a 17-year-old boy. That's just astounds me. I'm going to tell you right, that he had to be scared. Going down, he had to be scared. He had to be lonely. I guarantee you there were times, lots of times, he was crying on the way down to Egypt. He's 17. Never been away from home before. And now he's sold into slavery, no idea where he's going. I promise you he cried. I promise you there were moments of fear. I promise you there were moments of anxiety. But he never lost his faith. He might have lost his courage every now and then, but he never lost his faith. He never got bitter. He never got angry at the circumstances. He just leaned harder into the Lord. So whatever your meanwhile looks like, one, it's not going to last forever. But two, lean into the Lord. Don't get bitter. Don't get angry. Don't get upset. It's okay to be fearful at times. It's okay to be like, I just don't know how I'll make it. Don't get bitter. The third part of the meanwhile is this. God was there working in the meanwhile. God was working in the meanwhile. Look in chapter 39. There's a break here because it gives us a story of Judah, one of the sons, doing something really stupid. And then it picks it back up in chapter 39. Look in verse 1. It says, now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. Verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. And he was in the house of the Egyptian master, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, And the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him an overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and the field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. And because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food that he ate. I want you to see this. One, I love that verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph. And if you want to do something fun, underline the Lord was with him. The Lord did this through that 6 verses. The Lord was with him. The Lord blessed him. The Lord never left him. The Lord caused him to be successful. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house. The blessings of the Lord were over everything. I love that, but I want to see this. We're not given a time frame. There's no time frame from Canaan to Egypt. And there's no time frame from Egypt to being put in charge of Potiphar's house. At this point, he's not even a slave anymore. He's handling the money. He's handling the other employees of the house. He's handling the upkeep of the house and what goes on in the fields. He is in charge of everything except for the food. Everything. But we're not given that. Joseph wasn't given that walking down to Egypt. He didn't see that part of the story. But God, in the meanwhile, he was active. He was working in the meanwhile. We're not told, okay, he's up on that auction block in Egypt. There he is standing there. 17 years old, being sold off as a slave. We're not given how long it took for him to get to there, to being in charge of Potiphar's house. All we get in verse 4, look at verse 4, is the word so. He was sold into slavery. Here he is as a slave. So Potiphar makes him in charge of everything. That's all we get. We get a meanwhile and a so. I love that verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph. God was working in the meanwhile. What happened to Joseph was unfair. Joseph, I don't belong here, but God never left me. What you and I are going through, whether it's physical, emotional, financial, family, work, health, whatever it is, you name it, you plug in whatever meanwhile there is, whatever we're going through, it might be unfair. It might be scary. It might be painful. Church, look at it. You will never, ever, ever be alone. Ever. It might not seem like God is working in your meanwhile, but he's there. He's working, and he hasn't left you. Jesus said, I'm never going to leave you, and I'm not going to forsake you. So I encourage us to be patient in the meanwhile. Trust God in the meanwhile, because after a while, it's going to be worth it. Be patient and trust God in the meanwhile, because after a while, it's going to be worth it. There was a song that was written in 1946, I think. It says this: it will be worth it all when we see Jesus. Life's trials will seem so small when we see Christ. One glimpse of his dear face and all of our sorrows will erase. So bravely run the race to receive praise. I don't know what your meanwhile is this morning. I don't know. I know what mine is. But I don't know yours. But I guarantee you, everybody who's in the seat, everybody who's watching from home, you have a meanwhile going right now. Or maybe it seems God is distant. Maybe it seems like he's not working. Maybe it seems like, hey, this is totally unfair. I don't get this. I don't know why this is happening. But as a child of God, you're not alone. Jesus said, I'm with you always, even to the end of the world. God has not abandoned you. He is with you. He's in the pit. He's in the meanwhile. And not just that. Listen, you have God. But here's the deal. This is why it's so important to be a part of a church family. Because not only is God never going to leave you, but you have a church family who's going to walk with you. That's why the men of our church get together every Tuesday morning. I know it's early, but I'm going to invite all the men if you want to come be a part of that 6:30 in the morning. We pray over those cards that are dropped in. We pray for the prayer requests that are put on, because nobody walks alone. And for a lot of the guys who show up on Tuesday morning, they say, this is the best day of my week. Because nobody walks alone. I'm also going to encourage you, listen, reach out. Whatever your meanwhile is, reach out. I put my cell phone number out there everywhere. You can email at any time. We would love to come and walk with you, to pray with you, to talk with you. Sometimes it's just us sitting in a room and just being there and listening. But you're not alone. God is never going to leave you. He's in the meanwhile. He's working through it. And then you have a family, a group of believers who love you, and they're going to walk with you. Maybe you're listening at home. Maybe you're watching. Maybe you're sitting in here right now, and you don't have a relationship with Jesus. And you feel like you're alone. It's because you are. That hurts. I get it. I mean, I feel like I'm alone in my meanwhile. Like I feel like everything, it's not fair. Stuff's going on, but I feel like I'm walking this alone. It's because you are. But that's not the end of the story. See, if that's you this morning, I don't have a relationship with Jesus. I feel like I'm walking alone. You're here. You're either watching from home or you're sitting in a chair right now where God has pursued and chased after you, and he's inviting you into relationship. He is inviting you to come and understand you don't ever have to be alone. That's why he sent his son Jesus to die for you, to die for your sin, so you can have a relationship with him. And here's all it takes is you going, God, I believe I'm a sinner and I'm broken. But I believe you sent your son Jesus to die in my place for my sin. I ask you, God, forgive me and save me. Because Jesus died and rose again for me, and I want relationship with you. That's all there is. The Bible says it's with the heart. Confession is made unto righteousness. And it's just saying, I want relationship, and you don't have to be alone. So if you're here right now and you're like, I'm alone because I don't have a relationship with Jesus, it's up to you whether you leave alone or not. You know what I'm saying? It's up to you whether you walk out of here still alone, walking alone, in the meanwhile alone. If you're watching from home, it's up to you. When you turn off the computer, you turn off your phone, whether you leave that alone or not. Because salvation is offered. Relationship is offered. The question is, are you going to accept it? Believer, child of God, this morning, you're not alone. It's time to leave. The meanwhile is not going to last forever. Don't get bitter. Don't get angry. Don't walk away in the meanwhile, and understanding that God is always at work in your meanwhile. Let me have you bow your head and close your eyes for just a moment. Just a moment. We're gonna worship again, and we're gonna wrap up that way. But I just want to once again put it out there. Listen, if you're here this morning, you don't have a relationship with Jesus. He died in your place. He died for you. And then he rose again to set you free, to give you a home in heaven, to forgive you of your sins, but also to walk with you. The question is, have you ever surrendered to him? Have you ever asked him to forgive you? What I said just a minute ago, that's really all it is. It's not a magical prayer. It's, do you believe in your heart that you're a sinner? Do you believe that Jesus died for you and for your sin? Do you want relationship with God? Then just ask him. Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. There's no magical process. Do you want that relationship that Jesus bought and paid for you? And then believers, this morning again, I don't know what you're walking through. But quit living like you're walking through. It's time to understand that God is with you. He's working in the meanwhile. It's also time to understand you have people who God has placed in your life, in this room, who want to come and walk alongside you. This morning, I'm praying for all of us this morning, man, because all of us are. And in just a moment, we're gonna pray and we're gonna sing, and I'm gonna invite you when we sing that. Listen, however God's dealt with your heart, maybe you want to come down and pray. Maybe you want to pray right there in your seat. Maybe you're like, God, I just need to talk to you about my meanwhile right now because it seems like it's not ending. Maybe you want to give your life to Jesus. I don't know what that is for you. This morning when we sing, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to invite you to respond, but I'm also going to invite you to do another thing. You got the baskets up here. But this morning we have an opportunity to impact someone right in the middle of their meanwhile and bring just a little bit of hope. Hey, we want you to know there's a church that loves you. We'd love for you to come be a part of our family, but either way, we want you to know you're not forgotten. We love you. There is hope. You're not forgotten in the meanwhile. So this morning, however God's dealt with you, man, come down and grab a basket. Come down and pray. I'm going to ask you, if you come out here, hey, all the baskets are gone, then great. Pray for people who are in their meanwhile. Will you just respond this morning? God, we love you. We thank you for who you are. We're so thankful for this opportunity. Not just worship with our singing, but God, to have your word kind of penetrate our heart. As uncomfortable as that might be sometimes, God, I pray for everyone here this morning that's in a meanwhile right now. This seems like it just jumps from one verse to the next, but yet here we are still in this that might be lasting months or years or maybe even a lifetime. That for those that are in that right now, that God, they'll just lean into you, understanding that you're with them in this meanwhile. You haven't left them. You're still working. That God, we feel like I don't belong here. It's not fair. And that God, you haven't abandoned us. You're still working it out for our ultimate good, but really for your glory. God, I pray you be at the hearts of the people this morning. God, that we respond like you want us to respond today. And for anyone here who doesn't know you, God, that today be the day that they pray and ask you to save them, forgive them, so they can have a relationship with life. God, we give it all to you this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. We stand in worship.
I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone, Messiah still and all. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forever, Lord. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh, Lord our God. On the third, at break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, tremble death, where is your sting? The angels roar for Christ the King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh, Lord our God. That day we're looking forward to, church, shall return.
Blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints. Jesus is
Y'all lift your voice and let me hear you sing this morning. Oh, praise. Thank you for being here with us this morning. We want to encourage you as God continues to work and move in your heart that response time is, yes, this moment we call this response time, but response time is on the drive home. And when you get home and you're processing with your family, when you're talking this through and when you're allowing God and His Word and what you've heard to work in your life and you marinate on that and you let it just penetrate you. And so I want to encourage you, don't let this response time be the end of your response time. And we'll look forward to what God has for us next week. Don't forget that, like Pastor John said, that this is Ryan's last week with us. And man, we're going to miss him. And I want you to come and make sure that you encourage him, as God is moving and working in his life, as God is moving pieces around, as we are sending him out and celebrating all God is doing in his life, that you would just come down and celebrate him and thank him for all that he's done for Morning Star Baptist Church. But man, we're excited that God is moving and working in his life, and that God is moving and working in our church. And we can't wait to see what he does as we move forward for the kingdom, not just for our church, but for the kingdom. So let's pray, and then make sure you come down and catch Ryan before you get out of here. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we praise you. We're grateful that in our meanwhile, we're not alone. That in our meanwhile, we can still praise your name. That in our meanwhile, we're looking forward to that moment that we will stand before you, that we will spend forever with you. But we know that even in this moment, that you don't leave us alone. That you came to give us life, an abundant life, fulfilling life. But sometimes we walk through meanwhiles. Lord, if there's one here that doesn't know you, still give them the courage to grab somebody. Let's have that conversation about trusting you. We'll give you all the honor and glory. We thank you for Ryan. We thank you for the time that he spent. We ask that you bless his moving forward. We ask that you fill him with your spirit as he continues to take your word to the people that you've called him to. We'll give you all the glory. And we pray. Amen. Thank you, church. You're dismissed. Have a good one.